Listen carefully. Your life is not broken because of bad luck, lack of motivation, or missing information. Your life looks the way it does because you are living from an outdated identity. Every habit you repeat, every standard you tolerate, every decision you avoid is a reflection of who you believe you are. This audiobook is not about discipline. It's not about motivation. It's about identity replacement. In the next 6 months, you will either remain the same person with better excuses, or you will install a new self-image that makes discipline automatic, confidence natural, and success inevitable. If you stay to the end and apply what you hear, your old identity will not survive. Chapter 1: Your life is a mirror of who you think you are. Look at your life, not the version you explain to people, not the version you hope it becomes. Look at the results, the routines, the patterns, the outcomes you keep repeating. That is not bad luck. That is not circumstance. That is identity. Here is the truth most people never confront. You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your identity. Say it again. You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your identity. Every single time. Goals are aspirational. Identity is gravitational. Your goals pull lightly. Your identity pulls relentlessly. This is why motivation fades. This is why willpower collapses. This is why new beginnings quietly die after a few weeks, because your behavior is loyal to your self-image, not your intentions. You can want a better life. You can visualize success. You can write goals every morning. But if at your core you still see yourself as inconsistent, undisciplined, unlucky, behind, or broken, your behavior will always return to match that image. Always. Your identity is the thermostat. Your actions are the temperature. You can open the windows for a moment, but the system always corrects itself. That correction is sabotage, not conscious sabotage. Identity protection. Most people don't fail because they lack information. They fail because success threatens who they believe they are, and the mind will protect identity at all costs, even if that identity is painful. Let me show you how this works in the real world. You've seen it before. Maybe you've lived it. Someone says, "This time I'm serious." They buy the program, they clean their room, they wake up early for a week, but then something subtle happens. They get tired. They get bored, they get uncomfortable, and suddenly they're just taking a break. They're listening to their body. They're not trying to be too extreme. That's not logic. That's identity defending itself, because deep down the old self is still in control. The person who believes, "I'm not really disciplined. I've always struggled with consistency. I'm just not one of those people." That belief doesn't shout, it whispers. And those whispers guide behavior more than any goal ever will. Your behavior is loyal to your self-image, not your intentions. Say it again, your behavior is loyal to your self-image, not your intentions. This is why people try to change. Notice that word, try. Trying is the language of someone protecting an identity, because trying leaves an exit door. Trying allows failure without confronting the self-image. Trying says, "This didn't work because the method failed, not because I'm still the same person." But doing, real doing, threatens identity, because doing forces a question. If I can act differently, who have I been all this time? That question terrifies the ego, so instead people stay busy. They stay informed, they stay inspired, but they don't transform. Here's a hard truth you need to hear clearly. Your current life is the most honest expression of who you believe you are allowed to be, not what you want, not what you admire. What you believe is realistic for you. That belief controls your standards, and standards control behavior. You don't lack discipline. You lack identity alignment. If you believed you were a disciplined person, you wouldn't negotiate with yourself every morning. If you believed you were a focused person, distraction would feel foreign. If you believed you were someone who finishes what they start, quitting would feel unnatural. but right now the opposite feels normal. That's not because you're weak, it's because identity is powerful, and identity always wins until it's replaced. Most people try to build a new life on top of an old self-image. That never works. It's like installing new software on a corrupted operating system. The crash is inevitable. This is why affirmations fail when they're disconnected from behavior. This is why motivation burns out. This is why people relapse into old habits after breakthroughs, because identity was never addressed. Let's get something straight right now. Your past behavior does not define your future identity, but it does define your current one. And until you confront that honestly, nothing changes. You must be willing to say, "This version of me produced this life." Not with shame, with clarity, because clarity is power. If you don't accept that your current identity built your current reality, you will keep blaming tools, timing, and tactics, and nothing will change. Here's another uncomfortable truth. You unconsciously defend the identity that keeps you comfortable, even when it keeps you stuck. Comfort is familiar. Familiar feels safe. Safe feels right, even when it's killing your potential. This is why people sabotage momentum. This is why success feels heavy. This is why consistency feels exhausting. Because it contradicts the self-image. Your nervous system resists becoming someone unfamiliar, so it pulls you back to baseline, old habits, old thoughts, old excuses, not because they're good, but because they're known. Your job in the next 6 months is not to chase goals. It's to confront the identity that keeps resetting you to zero. Ask yourself this, and don't lie. Who do I believe I am when no one is watching? The one who delays, the one who overthinks, the one who starts strong and fades. That is the identity currently running your life. And until it changes, every goal you set is temporary. You must understand this at a deep level. Identity is not what you say. It is what you consistently do under discomfort. That's the mirror. Your life doesn't lie. Your calendar doesn't lie. Your habits don't lie. They are reflections. So stop asking, "Why can't I change?" and start asking, "Who am I being loyal to?" Because your behavior is loyal to your self-image, not your intentions. This chapter is not meant to inspire you. It's meant to corner you. To make it impossible to keep pretending that effort alone is the answer. Effort without identity change is friction. Effort with identity change is momentum, and momentum is what resets lives. In the next chapter, we're going to dismantle the most common trap people fall into once they realize this truth, the trap of self-improvement. Because improvement keeps the old identity alive, replacement kills it. You've seen the mirror. Now it's time to break it. Chapter 2, Stop trying to improve and start replacing. Most people fail at change for one simple reason. They are trying to improve a version of themselves that should have been retired. Read that again. They are trying to improve the old identity instead of replacing it. Self-improvement, as most people practice it, is a trap, a comfortable trap, a socially accepted trap, because improvement sounds productive. Improvement feels safe. Improvement allows the old self to stay in control, but improvement is not transformation. Improvement says, "I'm basically fine, I just need a few tweaks." Replacement says, "This version of me is no longer acceptable," and only one of those creates real change. Here is the core truth of this chapter, and I will repeat it until it sinks in. You don't upgrade habits, you uninstall identities. Say it again. You don't upgrade habits, you uninstall identities. Habits are symptoms. Identity is the cause. Yet most people attack symptoms and leave the cause untouched. They download a new routine. They try a new morning schedule. They experiment with productivity hacks. But they keep the same self-image, so the system eventually rejects the change. Let me show you exactly how this plays out. Think about waking up early. One person says, "I'm trying to wake up early." Notice the language, trying. What does that actually mean? It means they still see themselves as someone who struggles in the morning, someone who hits snooze, someone who needs perfect conditions. So every morning becomes a debate. Should I get up? Should I sleep more? I'll start tomorrow. And when they fail, it reinforces the identity. See, this just isn't me. Now look at the disciplined person. They don't try to wake up early. They wake up early, not because it's easy, not because they love it, but because it's consistent with who they believe they are. There is no debate. There is no negotiation. There is no identity conflict. The action flows from the self-image. This is why self-improvement fails, because it asks the old identity to act against itself indefinitely, and identity always wins. You can force behavior for a while, weeks, maybe months, but eventually the old self pulls you back. Not because you're lazy, not because you're broken, but because you're asking a version of you that was built for comfort to sustain discomfort. That's impossible long-term. Let's be very clear, trying harder is not the answer. Trying harder is often the problem, because trying implies effort without ownership. It keeps you in a loop of motivation, burnout, guilt, and reset. Replace trying with deciding who you are. This is where most people panic, because replacement feels extreme. Replacement feels like loss, and it is. You are not just changing habits. You are killing off a version of yourself, the version that negotiates, the version that waits for motivation, the version that needs reassurance. That version does not come with you into the next 6 months. Here's the rule you must adopt if you want real change. If a behavior requires motivation, it is not yet part of your identity. Read that again. If a behavior requires motivation, it is not yet part of your identity. Identity-based behaviors feel boring, automatic, non-dramatic. They happen whether you feel like it or not. This is why disciplined people look calm, why focused people don't talk much about focus, why confident people don't chase validation. They're not improving, they're being. So stop asking, how do I improve this habit? And start asking, who would not need to ask this question? That's the shift. Here's a practical exercise. Simple, uncomfortable, effective. Take one habit you've been trying to build for years. Exercise, consistency, focus, boundaries. Now write this sentence and finish it honestly. A person like me usually. Whatever you write reveals your identity. And that identity is what must be replaced, not argued with, not negotiated with, replaced. You do not convince an old identity to change, you outgrow it, and outgrowing requires decisive standards. This is where most people hesitate. They want change without finality, growth without sacrifice, results without loss. That doesn't exist. Replacement means some behaviors are no longer options, not because they're bad, but because they belong to someone you no longer are. This is why improvement fails. It keeps all options open. Replacement closes doors, and closed doors create clarity. Let's talk about language. Language reveals identity in real time. If you say, I'm trying, I hope, I'll see how it goes, you are speaking from the old self. Replace it with, I don't do that anymore. That's not who I am. I act first. Even if it feels fake at first, especially if it feels fake, because new identities always feel unnatural before they feel normal. Your job is not to feel authentic. Your job is to be consistent. Authenticity follows behavior, not the other way around. You don't wait to feel like a disciplined person to act disciplined. You act disciplined until it becomes who you are. That's replacement. And replacement is ruthless. It doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't wait for alignment. It doesn't care about comfort. It cares about congruence. Here's another hard truth. The old identity will beg to be improved instead of replaced. It will say, just be balanced. Don't be so hard on yourself. Take it slow. Not because it's wise, but because it wants to survive. Understand this clearly. The voice asking for moderation is often the voice of the identity you are trying to escape. Replacement requires silence, less thinking, less journaling, less consuming, more doing, more standards, more execution. This is where discipline stops being a tool and becomes a trait. You don't use discipline. You embody it, and embodiment only happens when there is no alternative identity to fall back on. So here's your directive for this chapter. Stop trying to improve your habits. Start replacing the person who needs improvement. Decide what the new identity does daily. Decide what the old identity is no longer allowed to do, and enforce that decision without emotion, because emotion belongs to the old self. Standards belong to the new one. You don't upgrade habits, you uninstall identities. Once that clicks, everything changes. In the next chapter, we're going to expose the most dangerous part of the old identity, the part you unknowingly defend every single day, because you cannot replace what you keep protecting. You've stopped trying. Now it's time to stop defending. Chapter 3's the invisible identity you defend every day. There is an identity you protect every single day. You don't announce it, you don't consciously choose it, but you defend it automatically, emotionally, relentlessly. And that identity is the reason change feels exhausting. Here is the central truth of this chapter, and you need to hear it without flinching. If you defend it, you will remain it. Say it again. If you defend it, you will remain it. Most people think they are fighting their weaknesses. They are not. They are defending them. They defend laziness by calling it needing rest. They defend emotional reactivity by calling it being honest. They defend inconsistency by calling it being human. They defend victim thinking by calling it being realistic. These defenses feel reasonable. They sound mature. They are socially approved. And they quietly lock identity in place, because anything you defend becomes part of who you are. Understand this, the ego does not care if an identity is successful or miserable. It only cares that it is familiar. Familiar equals safe. Safe equals survival. So when you threaten the old identity, the ego reacts, not with logic, with emotion, justifications, excuses, rationalizations, and most people mistake those reactions for truth. Let's break this down. Every time you attempt to change, there is a moment of friction. You feel resistance, discomfort, tension. That moment is not random. That is identity under threat, and what happens next determines everything. You either observe the resistance or you defend it. You say things like, "I'm just tired today. I've had a long week. I deserve a break. This isn't sustainable." Each sentence sounds harmless, but each one is a shield protecting the old self. And remember the rule, if you defend it, you will remain it. Most people never notice this process because it happens fast. A thought appears, an emotion follows, a justification forms, behavior adjusts. And the identity survives another day. Let's talk about laziness. Very few people identify as lazy, but many defend lazy behavior. They say, "I work better under pressure. I don't want to burn out. I'm pacing myself." But look at the pattern: delayed action, last-minute effort. Chronic inconsistency. That's not strategy, that's identity. And every time it's defended, it hardens. Now emotional reactivity. People say, "That's just how I am. I'm passionate. I feel things deeply." But emotional reactivity isn't depth, it's lack of regulation. And when you defend it, you give it permission to run your decisions. You justify snapping, overthinking, spiraling, and the identity becomes, "I am someone controlled by how I feel." That identity is fragile. Now victim thinking. This one is subtle and dangerous. Victim identity often hides behind intelligence. "I've had it harder than most. The system is rigged. People don't understand my situation." Some of that may be true, but when truth becomes a defense, it becomes a prison, because victim identity explains why you can't act, and explanations feel comforting, but they kill momentum. If you defend it, you will remain it. Here's the key insight you must internalize. You don't defend identity with facts. You defend it with emotion. The moment you feel defensive, pay attention. Defensiveness is the alarm bell. It means something you believe about yourself is being challenged. And instead of observing that challenge, most people protect the belief. They argue internally. They double down, they self-soothe, and nothing changes. Here's a rule you need to adopt immediately. Anytime you feel the urge to explain yourself, pause. Ask, what identity am I protecting right now? This question is uncomfortable. That's why it works. Growth does not come from understanding. It comes from interruption, interrupting the automatic defense loop. Let's get practical. For the next week, notice these moments when you skip what you said you'd do. When you react emotionally instead of responding calmly, when you procrastinate and justify it in those moments. Don't fix anything yet. Just notice the defense. Notice the story you tell yourself. That story is the identity speaking, and identity always tries to sound reasonable. That's the trap. The old identity does not announce itself as weakness. It presents itself as logic. It says, this isn't the right time. You'll do it later. You don't need to be extreme. And if you believe it, you stay the same. Most people think change requires force. It doesn't. It requires refusal. Refusal to defend the old self. You don't argue with it. You don't analyze it. You don't negotiate. You let it be uncomfortable and you act anyway. That's how identities collapse, not through motivation, through exposure. When the old identity no longer works, it dissolves. But as long as you protect it, it stays alive. Here's another hard truth. The identity you defend feels like you, but it's just conditioning, patterns learned, standards inherited, responses reinforced. You were not born inconsistent, you practiced it. You were not born reactive, you repeated it. You were not born passive, you normalized it, which means it can be unlearned, but only if you stop defending it. Let me say this clearly. Self-awareness without action is another form of defense. You can understand yourself deeply and still remain the same. Insight is not transformation, behavior is. So stop saying, that's just how I am. That sentence is identity armor. Replace it with, that's what I've been practicing. Because practices can change. Identities can be replaced, but only if you stop protecting the old one. Here is your directive for this chapter. Catch yourself in the act of defense. Every excuse, every justification, every emotional explanation. Label it, not with judgment, with precision. Say, this is the identity trying to survive. Then act in contradiction. Do the thing anyway. Stay calm anyway. Follow through anyway. Each time you do this, the old identity weakens, because identity needs defense to live, and when defense stops, identity collapses. If you defend it, you will remain it, but if you expose it without emotion, it loses power. This chapter is about honesty, brutal honesty, not about becoming perfect. About becoming uncompromising. You are not here to feel understood. You are here to reset your life, and that requires letting the old identity feel threatened, uncomfortable, unprotected. In the next chapter, we're going to talk about the catalyst that makes identity replacement inevitable. Because most people don't change until pain forces them to. You've stopped defending the old self. Now it's time to understand the role of pain in transformation. Chapter 4. Pain is the gateway to identity change. Most people say they want to change. Very few people are willing to feel what change requires. This is the truth you cannot escape. Identity only changes when the current self becomes more painful than the unknown. Read that again, slowly. Identity only changes when the current self becomes more painful than the unknown. This is why people stay stuck for years, decades, lifetimes, not because they don't know what to do, but because staying the same still hurts less than becoming someone new. And the mind always chooses the lesser pain. Here is the phrase you must burn into your nervous system: comfort preserves identity, discomfort dissolves it. Say it again: comfort preserves identity, discomfort dissolves it. Nothing changes in comfort. Nothing. Comfort is where identity rests, where habits solidify, where standards stagnate. That's why growth feels violent at first, because identity does not loosen politely. It must be pressured, challenged, cornered. Look at every real transformation you've ever witnessed, not the slow, motivational kind, the real ones: the addict who quit overnight, the person who got in shape after a diagnosis, the individual who left a toxic life after one final humiliation. What changed? Pain crossed a threshold. The old life became unbearable, and suddenly the unknown felt safer than staying the same. That's the gateway, not inspiration, not hope, pain. Most people are waiting for motivation to save them. Motivation is weak, pain is honest. Pain does not negotiate, pain does not lie, pain does not allow excuses, and that's why it works. Here's the mistake people make: they try to change while still cushioning themselves from pain. They keep backup plans, they keep comforts, they keep escapes: scrolling, snacking, numbing, distracting. And as long as pain is numbed, identity remains intact, because comfort preserves identity, discomfort dissolves it. Understand this clearly: your current identity survives because you keep soothing the consequences of being it. You soften the dissatisfaction, you rationalize the frustration, you normalize the mediocrity. And as long as you do that, nothing will break, and nothing will change. Most people never hit a breaking point because they keep lowering their standards to avoid pain. They say, "This is just a season. Things will work out. It could be worse." Those statements feel positive. They are anesthetics. They reduce pain just enough to keep you stuck. But transformation does not happen in anesthesia. It happens in full awareness. This is where you must become intentional. You don't wait for life to break you. You apply pressure on purpose. Let me be clear: pain does not mean chaos. It does not mean self-destruction. It does not mean burnout. It means removing comfort. It means stopping the behaviors that soften the truth. It means feeling the full weight of your current identity, without escape. Here's a hard exercise. Sit with this question and do not rush past it. What is the long-term pain of staying who I am? Not tomorrow, not next week. 5 years, 10 years, same habits, same standards, same excuses. What does that cost you? Your health, your respect, your self-trust, your potential. Stay there. Most people never do. They distract themselves the moment this question starts to hurt. But this pain is productive. This pain creates leverage, and leverage is what moves identity. Here's another truth most people resist: the unknown is not what scares you. Losing the familiar is. Even when the familiar is miserable. That's why people stay in bad relationships, bad jobs, bad routines, because at least they know the pain. But identity change requires stepping into uncertainty, and uncertainty feels like death to the ego, so the ego clings. And the longer you cling, the more pain you delay, until life forces it. Your job is to stop waiting, to stop negotiating, to stop saying, "I'll change when is a lie." Change happens when pain becomes non-negotiable, so make it non-negotiable. Remove the cushions, remove the excuses. Remove the escapes, not forever, just long enough for the truth to land. Here's what this looks like in practice. If you're inconsistent, stop forgiving missed commitments. Feel the discomfort of broken self-trust. If you're emotionally reactive, stop justifying it. Sit with the embarrassment of lack of control. If you're lazy, stop calling it rest. Experience the anxiety of wasted potential, not to shame yourself, but to wake yourself up, because comfort preserves identity, discomfort dissolves it. This is why disciplined environments work. Cold showers, early mornings, hard training, silence, they are not about toughness. They are about controlled discomfort, discomfort that teaches the nervous system a new normal. And when discomfort becomes normal, identity shifts. Here's the critical insight: you don't need more pain, you need less avoidance. Life is already giving you feedback, you just keep muting it, so stop muting. Let dissatisfaction speak, let frustration inform you, let regret instruct you. Those feelings are not enemies, they are signals, and signals are meant to be acted on. Most people numb signals and then wonder why they feel lost. You're not lost, you're anesthetized. Remove the anesthesia, and clarity returns. Now let's be precise. Pain alone does not change identity. Pain plus action does. Some people suffer for years and never change. Why? Because they feel pain, but they keep the same responses. They complain, they vent, they distract. That reinforces identity. The pain must be paired with a new standard. A line that does not move. This is no longer acceptable. No emotion, no drama, just a decision, and then behavior aligned with that decision. That's how breaking points work. They force a standard upgrade, but you don't need to wait for life to break you. You can choose the pressure, you can choose the discomfort, you can choose the standards. This is where power returns. Let me say this plainly. If you are comfortable right now, you are not changing. You might be learning, you might be planning, you might be consuming. But you are not transforming. Transformation has a cost, and the currency is discomfort, paid daily, small amounts, consistently, not chaos, not extremes, but non-negotiables. This chapter is about reframing pain, not as punishment, but as proof you're exiting an old identity. When it feels uncomfortable, you're doing it right. When it feels unfamiliar, you're on the edge of replacement. When it feels lonely, quiet, or boring, you're leaving the old self behind. Comfort preserves identity. Discomfort dissolves it. Remember that. Because in the next chapter, we're going to talk about the most dangerous moment in transformation, the moment when the old identity tries to negotiate its survival. You've embraced discomfort. Now you must learn to cut clean. No negotiation, no exceptions. Chapter 5: Detach from the old self without negotiation. There is a moment in every transformation where progress slows, not because you're tired, not because the method failed, but because the old self starts talking, quietly, reasonably, persuasively. This chapter exists for that moment. Because here is the truth you must accept without emotion. You cannot negotiate with the identity that ruined your standards. Say it again. You cannot negotiate with the identity that ruined your standards. And here is the rule that saves people years of relapse. The old self does not get a vote. Repeat it. The old self does not get a vote. Most people lose momentum not at the beginning, but after initial success. They clean up their routine. They gain clarity. They feel stronger. And then the old identity shows up with a compromise. Just this once, one last time, you've earned it. You don't want to be extreme. This is not temptation. This is negotiation. And negotiation is how identity survives. Let us be clear. The old self does not want to stop you from changing. It wants to slow you down because slowing feels reasonable. Stopping would expose itself, so it offers deals. Deals sound harmless, but every deal resets standards, and standards are identity in action. Here's how people lose 6 months of progress in 6 minutes. They say, I'll just do this one last time, one last late night, one last binge, one last excuse, one last delay. But identity does not recognize last times. It only recognizes permission, and once permission is granted, the door is open. This is why people relapse hard after doing well, not because they failed, because they negotiated. And the moment you negotiate, the old identity regains authority. Here's the hard truth. If you have to debate it, the answer is no. Read that again. If you have to debate it, the answer is no. New identities do not debate, they execute. Debate is the old self asking for relevance, and relevance is dangerous. You must understand this at a deep level. The old identity is intelligent. It has studied you for years. It knows your language, your values, your fears, so it does not attack directly. It uses reason. I need balance. I don't want to burn out. I should enjoy life. Those phrases are not wisdom. They are survival tactics, because the old identity knows one thing. If it gets one exception, it gets momentum, and momentum always favors the familiar. This is why detachment must be clean. No drama, no hatred, no shame, just refusal. Detachment is not emotional. It is administrative. You don't argue with outdated software. You uninstall it. You don't negotiate with a behavior that breaks trust. You remove access. This is where people misunderstand discipline. Discipline is not force. Discipline is elimination of choice. When the old self does not get a vote, there is peace. No internal war, no exhaustion, just clarity. Let me show you how this works in real life. Someone trying to quit distraction says, "I'll check my phone just for a minute." That's negotiation. The disciplined version says, "I don't do that anymore." No explanation, no justification, just identity. Someone trying to get consistent says, "I'll skip today and make up for it tomorrow." That's negotiation. The replaced identity says, "Skipping is not an option." Again, no emotion, just a rule. Rules remove debate. Debate drains energy. Here's a key insight. Most people think rigidity is dangerous. It's not. Inconsistency is. Rigidity early creates freedom later. When standards are firm, the mind relaxes, because it knows what happens next. This is why high performers look calm. They are not constantly deciding. They already decided. Now let's talk about the most seductive lie of the old identity. I'm different now. I can handle it. That sentence has destroyed more progress than failure ever has, because it assumes growth means immunity. It doesn't. Growth means awareness. And awareness means you know exactly what resets you. The old identity never becomes safe. It becomes dormant. And dormant things wake up when invited, so don't invite it. This is where you must adopt a non-negotiable mindset. Certain behaviors are no longer choices, not because they're evil, but because they belong to someone you are no longer willing to be. This is not about morality. It's about alignment. Here's a practical rule you must apply immediately. If a behavior belonged to the old identity, it is permanently off the table. Not for now, not until I'm stronger. Permanently, because strength is built through exclusion, not exposure. Most relapses happen because people test themselves. They want proof they've changed. That's ego. Change is proven through consistency, not temptation. You don't need to test fire. You need to build distance. Detachment is distance. Physical, digital, environmental. Remove triggers without apology. You are not weak for doing so. You are strategic. Now let's address guilt. The old identity uses guilt to pull you back. You're being too hard. You're not fun anymore. You're isolating. Ignore it. Growth is lonely at first, because you are leaving a familiar version of yourself and often familiar people. That's the cost. And costs paid up front prevent larger costs later. Remember this, negotiation always favors the weaker standard, and the weaker standard always favors the old identity. So don't negotiate, decide once, then obey. This is where trust is rebuilt, not trust from others, self-trust. Every time you refuse negotiation, you prove something to yourself. I am serious. I follow through, I don't abandon standards. That proof compounds and identity solidifies. Here's the mantra for this chapter. Simple, non-emotional, final. The old self does not get a vote. Say it when temptation appears. Say it when fatigue hits. Say it when excuses sound logical. The old self does not get a vote. You are not fighting yourself. You are replacing yourself. And replacement requires clean cuts. No nostalgia, no bargaining, no just this once. Because just this once is how the past survives. This chapter is about authority. Who is in charge? Your emotions, your impulses, your history, or your standards. Standards don't negotiate, they enforce, and enforcement creates identity. In the next chapter, we're going to talk about how identity is actually installed, day by day, without motivation, without emotion, and without waiting to feel ready. You've cut off the old self. Now you must build the new one correctly. Chapter 6. Install identity through repetition, not emotion. If you are waiting to feel ready, you will wait forever. Feelings are unreliable. Repetition is law. Read that again. Feelings are unreliable. Repetition is law. This chapter will free you from one of the biggest lies in self-help, the belief that emotion leads behavior. It doesn't. Behavior leads emotion. Action leads belief. Repetition leads identity. Here is the rule you must adopt if you want this reset to work. You act your way into belief, not the other way around. Say it again. You act your way into belief, not the other way around. Most people are doing it backwards. They say, once I feel motivated, I'll be consistent. Once I believe in myself, I'll take action. Once I feel confident, I'll show up. That order guarantees failure, because feelings fluctuate, belief wavers, motivation disappears, but repetition does not negotiate. Disciplined people are not disciplined because they feel like it. They feel like it because they are disciplined. That distinction matters. Let's destroy the myth right now. There is no emotional state that sustains identity change. None. Every emotional state fades. Excitement fades. Anger fades. Inspiration fades. If your new identity depends on emotion, it will collapse. That's why repetition, not intensity, is the mechanism of identity installation. Identity is built the same way habits are built, through boring, through consistency, through doing the same thing when nothing dramatic is happening. This is where most people quit, because repetition without emotion feels empty. It feels mechanical, uninspiring, pointless, and that's exactly why it works. Because identity does not form during emotional spikes, it forms during neutral moments, when you act without feeling like it, when no one is watching, when there is no reward. That's when the nervous system updates its self-image. It says, this is who we are now. Not because you declared it, because you demonstrated it. Let's talk about disciplined people. They wake up early not because they love mornings, but because waking up early is normal to them. They train not because they feel motivated, but because training is scheduled. They focus not because they feel inspired, but because distraction is not an option. Their emotions follow their behavior, not the other way around. And over time, behavior becomes belief. Belief becomes identity. This is why affirmations fail without action. You can say, I am disciplined, 1,000 times. But if your behavior contradicts it, the nervous system ignores the words. It trusts actions. Always. The body believes what you repeatedly do, not what you occasionally say. So stop asking, how do I feel today? Start asking, what does the identity do today? That question removes emotion from the equation, and emotion is the enemy of consistency. Let's be practical. Identity installation requires 3 things: clear behaviors, daily repetition, zero emotional negotiation, not goals, not vision boards, behaviors. What does the disciplined identity do every day, no matter what? It wakes up at a certain time, it completes a specific task, it follows through on a non-negotiable, simple, unimpressive, effective. Here is where people overcomplicate this. They want massive change. They want transformation they can feel, but identity doesn't need magnitude, it needs frequency. One small behavior done daily installs identity faster than extreme effort done occasionally. Why? Because repetition signals safety. The nervous system says, this is stable, this is who we are, and stability is what identity is built on. This is why people who train lightly every day outperform people who train hard once a week. This is why consistency beats intensity. Every time. Now let's talk about resistance. Resistance doesn't mean something is wrong. Resistance means the behavior is not yet identity aligned. So do not interpret resistance as a signal to stop. Interpret it as a signal to repeat. This is where the phrase becomes law. You act your way into belief, not the other way around. Act first, believe later. Act again, believe more. Eventually, belief becomes unnecessary because the behavior is automatic. This is when identity locks in. Let me say something important. Repetition must happen even on bad days, especially on bad days. Bad days are when identity is tested. Good days don't matter. Anyone can act on good days. Bad days decide who you are. If you only act when you feel good, you are training inconsistency. If you act regardless of mood, you are training identity. This is where most people fall back into emotional living. They ask, am I tired? Am I stressed? Am I in the right headspace? Those questions reinforce the old identity. The new identity does not check in emotionally before acting. It checks the standard and then executes. No story, no meaning, no drama. This is how discipline becomes calm. Now let's address boredom. Boredom is a sign that repetition is working. When a behavior becomes boring, it is becoming normalized. When it becomes normalized, it is becoming identity. Most people mistake boredom for stagnation. It's the opposite. Boredom means you are no longer emotionally attached, and emotional detachment is required for mastery. So when you feel bored doing the right things, keep going. That boredom is the sound of identity forming. Here's a simple framework you must follow. Choose 3 identity behaviors. Only 3. Behaviors so small they feel almost too easy, but non-negotiable, every day, no exceptions, no emotional clauses. Examples. Wake up at the same time, complete one focused work block, move your body for 20 minutes. Not impressive, but powerful, because repetition beats ambition. Track completion, not feelings. You are not building motivation, you are building proof, and proof rewires self-image. Each completed repetition sends a signal. I follow through, I am consistent, I do what I say. That signal compounds, and after weeks something shifts. You stop forcing it, you stop thinking about it, you just do it. That's identity. Understand this. The moment you wait to feel like it, you reinforce the old identity. The moment you act without feeling like it, you weaken it. Every repetition is a vote, and identity is the result of the votes you cast most often. So cast them intentionally, not emotionally. This chapter is about removing emotion from the process. You are not trying to feel different. You are trying to be different. Feelings will follow, or they won't. It doesn't matter, because identity is not emotional. It's behavioral, and behavior is controllable. So here is your directive. Stop checking your mood. Stop waiting for alignment. Stop asking if you feel ready. Do the behavior again and again and again. You act your way into belief, not the other way around. That is how identity is installed. In the next chapter, we're going to raise the pressure. Because repetition alone is not enough if your standards are still low. Identity cannot survive in an environment of low expectations. You've learned how to install identity. Now we're going to make sure the old one cannot coexist. Chapter 7. Raise standards until the old you can't survive. Identity does not collapse because you want it to. It collapses because it can no longer meet the standard. That is the central truth of this chapter. Identity collapse happens when standards exceed old capacity. Read that again. Identity collapse happens when standards exceed old capacity. Most people try to change while keeping their standards low enough for the old self to survive, and then they wonder why nothing sticks. Here is the law you must understand and live by. What you tolerate defines who you are. Say it again. What you tolerate defines who you are, not what you intend, not what you promise, not what you post online. What you tolerate: missed commitments, low effort, emotional excuses, half-finished work. Each tolerance is a signal. And that signal tells the nervous system, this is acceptable, and whatever is acceptable becomes identity. This is why raising standards is non-negotiable, not gradually, not someday, decisively, because the old identity is perfectly adapted to your current standards. It knows exactly how much effort is required, exactly how many excuses are allowed, exactly how far it can go without consequences. So if you want the old identity to die, you don't attack it directly. You raise the standards until it cannot breathe. Let me be very clear. Standards are not goals. Goals are future-oriented. Standards are present-moment rules. Goals say, I want to. Standards say, I do. Goals are optional. Standards are enforced. And enforcement is what shapes identity. This is where most people hesitate. They're afraid of pressure. They think high standards lead to burnout. That's a lie told by low standards. Burnout comes from inconsistency, not pressure. Burnout comes from emotional negotiation, not structure. High standards create clarity. Clarity reduces stress, because when standards are clear, decisions disappear. You don't wonder what to do. You already know. This is how identity changes fast. Here's the formula. Raise standards, remove tolerance, force adaptation. Either the old identity evolves or it collapses, and collapse is not a failure. Collapse is a replacement opportunity. Let's talk about daily non-negotiables. These are not habits. They are identity enforcers. Non-negotiables are behaviors that happen regardless of mood, schedule, or circumstance. No exceptions. No stories, examples, wake-up time, physical movement, focused work, digital boundaries, simple behaviors, but enforced daily. This is what breaks old identities, because the old identity relies on flexibility. I'll do it later. I'll make it up. Today doesn't count. Non-negotiables eliminate those loopholes, and when loopholes disappear, identity is forced to change. Here's what most people get wrong. They try to raise standards emotionally. They hype themselves up. They make dramatic promises that never lasts. Standards are not emotional. They are structural, written, scheduled, tracked, no interpretation required. This removes you from the equation, and that's the point. Identity change is not personal, it's mechanical. If the standard is met, identity shifts. If it's not, consequences are felt. No drama. This is why elite environments work. Military, sports teams, high-performance cultures. Standards are clear. Tolerance is low. People either adapt or they're removed, and adaptation changes identity. Your life must become that environment. Self-imposed, self-enforced. This is where self-respect is built. Not through affirmations, through standards upheld under pressure. Every time you tolerate less than your standard, you weaken identity. Every time you enforce it, you strengthen it. Let's talk about the most dangerous tolerance of all, negotiated standards. I'll allow this today. I'll be strict tomorrow. That sentence kills progress, because standards that move are not standards, they are preferences. And preferences do not change identity. Standards must be boring, predictable, unemotional, like gravity. They apply whether you feel like it or not. That's how the old identity gets squeezed out. Here's an uncomfortable truth. If the old you is surviving comfortably, your standards are too low. Read that again. If the old you is surviving comfortably, your standards are too low. The old identity should feel pressure, confusion, resistance, fatigue, not because you're harming yourself, but because you're exceeding its capacity. That pressure is necessary. Pressure creates adaptation. Adaptation creates identity change. Without pressure, nothing evolves. Now let's address fear. Raising standards feels scary because it removes escape routes. No more excuses, no more fallback stories. You either meet the standard or you face the consequence. That consequence is discomfort. But remember, comfort preserves identity. Discomfort dissolves it. You already learned this. Now you apply it structurally. You don't wait for discomfort. You schedule it. This is where people confuse harshness with effectiveness. Raising standards is not about punishing yourself. It's about creating an environment where the old identity cannot function. That's not cruelty. That's design. Think of it like altitude training. At higher altitude, old capacity fails. The body must adapt, or it breaks. And adaptation creates strength. Same principle. Raise the altitude. Let the old self struggle. Do not rescue it. Rescue is tolerance. Tolerance preserves identity. Say it again. What you tolerate defines who you are. If you tolerate missed workouts, you are someone who skips. If you tolerate emotional outbursts, you are reactive. If you tolerate half effort, you are inconsistent, not because you want to be, but because tolerance trains identity. So stop training the wrong one. Here's your directive for this chapter. Identify 3 areas where you've been lenient. Be honest. Then set one non-negotiable standard for each, not ambitious, absolute. Examples. I start work at this time every day. I train no matter what. I don't scroll before noon. Then enforce them for 30 days. No evaluation, no adjustment, just enforcement. You will feel resistance. That's good. Resistance means the old identity is being challenged. Do not lower the standard to reduce resistance. That is how people stay the same. Raise the standard until the old you can't survive. And something interesting happens. You don't rise to meet the standard. You become someone who lives there. That's identity shift. Quiet, undramatic, permanent. This chapter is about authority. Who decides what is acceptable? Your emotions, your fatigue, your past, or your standards? Standards create structure. Structure creates identity, and identity creates results. In the next chapter, we're going to refine this further by addressing the fastest way identity is reinforced or destroyed. Not through actions, through language. You've raised the standards. Now you must align how you speak, because words program behavior faster than motivation ever will. Chapter 8. Speak as the person you are becoming. Your language is not neutral. It is not decorative. It is not harmless. Your language is programming. And here is the rule you must understand if you want identity change to stick. Your words are instructions to your nervous system. Say it again. Your words are instructions to your nervous system. Every sentence you speak out loud or internally tells your body who you are, what is allowed, and what to expect. This is why people sabotage themselves without realizing it. They change habits. They raise standards, but they keep speaking the language of the old identity, and language always wins. You cannot speak like the old self and live as the new one. It doesn't work, because the nervous system listens more to repetition than intention. And language is the most repeated behavior you perform all day. Most people think motivation drives action. It doesn't. Language drives perception. Perception drives behavior. Behavior drives identity. That chain starts with words. This is why two people can do the same action and get different results. One says, I'm trying to get disciplined. The other says, I don't miss. Same action, different identity trajectory. Let's expose the most dangerous words in self-development. Trying, hoping, someday I'll see, I should. These words feel humble. They feel realistic. They are poison. Because they all do the same thing. They delay identity. Trying tells the nervous system, this is optional. Hoping tells it, this is out of my control. Someday tells it, this is not urgent. And the nervous system responds accordingly. Low urgency, low commitment, low consistency. Then people wonder why nothing changes. Here's the truth. The disciplined identity does not use tentative language, not because it's aggressive, but because it's decided. Decided language removes ambiguity, and ambiguity is where the old identity hides. When you say, I'm trying to wake up early, your nervous system hears, we might not. When you say, I wake up early, it hears, this is who we are. That difference is not semantic, it's biological. Your body prepares differently, your attention sharpens, your tolerance changes. Your resistance lowers because clarity calms the system. Let me be very clear, this is not about lying to yourself. It's about speaking from standards instead of feelings. Feelings fluctuate, standards don't. So stop narrating your emotions. Start stating your rules. Here's an example. Old language, I'm exhausted today. I don't know if I can. New language, I'm tired, I still execute. Same reality, different identity instruction. You didn't deny the feeling, you removed its authority, and authority is what matters. Most people give emotions voting rights. Language is how they do it. I feel like I deserve a break. I feel unmotivated. I feel off today. Those statements are reports, but they become commands, because whatever you emphasize, the nervous system obeys. So here's a rule you must adopt immediately. Do not describe feelings unless action depends on them. Feelings are data, not directives, and the way you speak determines whether data becomes control. Now let's talk about internal language. The voice in your head matters more than what you say out loud. That voice runs constantly, and for most people, it is undisciplined, emotional, and permissive. This is hard. I'm not built for this. I always mess this up. Those sentences feel private. They are not. They are rehearsals, and rehearsed language becomes identity. So you must clean up your internal speech, not with affirmations, with precision. Replace emotional narration with factual instruction. Instead of, this is overwhelming, say, this is unfamiliar, continue. Instead of, I don't feel like it, say, feelings are irrelevant, execute. This is not cruelty, it's leadership. You are leading yourself, and leaders do not speak in uncertainty. They speak in direction. Here is another key insight. Language compresses behavior. The fewer words you use, the stronger the instruction. That's why disciplined people speak simply. I don't do that. I start at 6. I finish what I start. No explanation. Explanation weakens commitment. The more you explain yourself, the more room you create for doubt. This is why overthinking and overtalking often go together. They feed each other. Silence sharpens identity, but before silence, language must be corrected. Let's talk about self-description. How you describe yourself, especially casually, is identity reinforcement. I'm bad at mornings. I'm not consistent. I've always struggled with focus. Those statements feel honest. They are contracts, and the nervous system honors contracts, even destructive ones. Stop signing them. You are not required to narrate your past. You are required to install your future. So replace self-descriptions with identity statements rooted in behavior, not fantasy, not ego, behavior. Instead of, I'm trying to be disciplined, say, I act on my standards. Instead of, I'm inconsistent, say, I'm correcting that. Notice the difference. The second version assumes movement. An assumption shapes behavior. Here's something uncomfortable you must accept. People who change quickly are ruthless with language. They cut weak words immediately. They don't romanticize struggle. They don't speak in maybes. They speak in directives, not because they're confident, but because confidence follows clarity. Language creates clarity. Now let's apply this practically. For the next 7 days, you must do a language audit. Pay attention to how you describe effort, how you explain failure, how you talk about the future anytime you hear yourself say, "I'll try," "I hope," "maybe," "stop." Correct it immediately, out loud if possible. Replace it with "I will," "I do," "I don't negotiate." This will feel awkward. Good. Awkward means unfamiliar. Unfamiliar means new identity territory. Here's the trap to avoid. Do not use aggressive language without behavioral backing. That creates dissonance. The nervous system rejects empty words, so your language must match your standards, not exceed them. Speak from what you enforce, not what you wish. That alignment builds trust with yourself, and self-trust is the foundation of identity. Remember this, your words are instructions to your nervous system. If you give soft instructions, you get soft behavior. If you give clear instructions, you get clarity. This is why people who speak decisively feel calmer. Their nervous system isn't confused. Confusion creates anxiety. Clarity creates control. Now let's tie this back to the reset. You are not resetting your life by thinking differently. You are resetting it by behaving differently consistently. Language accelerates or sabotages that process. It can either reinforce the new identity or keep the old one alive. Choose deliberately. Speak less. Speak cleaner. Speak with standards, not to impress others, to instruct yourself. This chapter is about alignment. What you say must match what you enforce, and what you enforce must match who you are becoming. In the next chapter, we're going to address the final amplifier of identity, your surroundings, because even perfect language and strong standards will fail in the wrong environment. You've corrected how you act. You've corrected how you speak. Now we correct where you live mentally and physically. Chapter 9, Environment is an Identity Amplifier. Your environment is louder than your intentions. It does not negotiate. It does not wait. It votes. And here is the truth you cannot escape. Your environment votes on who you become. Say it again. Your environment votes on who you become. Everything in your surroundings, physical, social, informational, casts a vote. Every object, every person, every routine, every habit reinforced by your environment either strengthens the old you or accelerates the new one. Most people underestimate this. They work on identity in isolation. They read books. They listen to podcasts. They set standards. And then they go home. And their environment silently, invisibly undoes all the work, because environments enforce identity subconsciously. They do not ask for consent. They simply reward the familiar and punish the unfamiliar. Let's break this down. Think about the old you. The version you are trying to replace. What surrounds it? Messy spaces, chaotic routines, people who tolerate mediocrity, media that numbs attention. Every single thing in that environment reinforces the identity you are leaving, and your nervous system obeys, silently, automatically, reliably. Your new identity will struggle until you amplify it with the right environment. Here is the fundamental rule of this chapter. Your environment either votes for the old self or accelerates the new one. There is no neutral. Now let's talk specifics. 1. Physical environment. Your body reacts to physical cues constantly. Clutter signals chaos. Disorganization signals low standards. Comfort signals permission to procrastinate. Changing your environment changes behavior automatically. Clean your space. Organize your workstation. Remove objects that anchor the old identity, old junk food, unread magazines, distracting devices. Add cues that enforce the new identity, books you want to read, exercise equipment, tools that signal action. Your environment becomes a training ground. Every glance, every movement, every object nudges behavior. 2. Routines are the invisible scaffolding of identity. If your routine allows the old self to exist, it will survive. Morning scrolls, late-night snacking, skipping important tasks for temporary comfort. Replace routines that reinforce weakness with routines that enforce strength. Wake up at the same time. Exercise, plan work in focused blocks. Journal, track progress. Your routines become non-negotiable pathways for the new identity. Break one and the vote goes to the old self. Execute consistently and the vote goes to the new you. 3 inputs: what you consume informs who you become. Media, social media, news, entertainment, conversations. Most inputs are silent indoctrination. They reinforce fear, distraction, scarcity, and mediocrity. Control inputs. Feed your nervous system with the signals of the person you want to be. Books, podcasts, videos, people, and music that model discipline, intelligence, consistency, and courage. Your environment votes on who you become. Do not leave it to chance. 4. Associations. The people around you are powerful amplifiers. The old self finds comfort with people who validate it, people who let it stay small, people who excuse failure. Your new self needs people who reinforce new standards, people who demand accountability, people who model discipline and action. This is why isolation during transformation is dangerous, and why choosing your inner circle deliberately is non-negotiable. Here is an example of environment amplification in action. 2 people want to become disciplined. Person A reads, journals, and sets standards, but goes home to a cluttered apartment, scrolls social media for hours, and hangs out with friends who mock ambition. Person B reads, journals, sets standards, and goes home to a minimalist space, blocks distractions, surrounds themselves with ambitious peers, and tracks every micro-behavior. Who do you think changes faster? The environment votes loudly. Let's talk about reinforcement. Behavior repeated in the correct environment becomes automatic. The cues in your space, your schedule, and your associations act like accelerators. You don't rely on motivation. You rely on design, and design is faster than discipline. Most people try to rely on willpower alone. Willpower is weak. It fades. It negotiates. Environment removes negotiation. It automates identity. Now here's the hard truth. You cannot keep your old environment and expect new results. You cannot partially change surroundings and hope for permanent identity change. Partial votes for the new self get drowned out by repeated votes for the old self. Change is not just about action. It's about amplification. Surround yourself with people, spaces, routines, and inputs that make the old identity impossible to live in. And notice this. When the environment votes against the old self, resistance spikes. You will feel uncomfortable. You will want to retreat. That's normal. That's exactly when transformation occurs. Discomfort is the sound of your old identity being challenged. It is a signal that you are amplifying the new self effectively. Here's a practical framework. Walk through your day and identify every environmental factor that votes for the old self. Remove, replace, or neutralize it. Add 3 elements that vote for the new self. OA space Q, organized desk, exercise setup. OA schedule Q, non-negotiable routine. OA social or informational Q, mentor, accountability, content that reinforces the new identity, no excuses. No debate, every vote counts. Here S the repeated mantra. Your environment votes on who you become. If you live in chaos, your nervous system will vote for chaos. If you surround yourself with discipline, your nervous system will vote for discipline. It is not theoretical, it is mechanical. And here's the final point. Your environment can accelerate identity faster than motivation ever will. It is the silent coach. It does not get tired. It does not argue. It simply reinforces what you allow. So design it deliberately. Curate every element. And when your environment screams at your old self, listen, act accordingly, because votes add up. Identity is the sum of repeated environmental signals. Change your environment, and the new identity becomes inevitable. In the next chapter, we're going to combine all these elements, behavior, repetition, language, and environment, into a single daily architecture for transformation. You've learned to act. You've learned to speak. You've raised standards. Now you must live inside a system that makes the new you unstoppable. Chapter 10, The 6-Month Identity Lock-In Protocol. 6 months, that's all it takes. 6 months of disciplined action. 6 months of unflinching standards. 6 months of daily identity reinforcement. If you execute correctly, in 6 months your old self will no longer exist. Not because you tried hard, not because you were motivated, but because what you repeat for 6 months becomes who you are. Say it again. What you repeat for 6 months becomes who you are. This is the principle behind the 6-month identity lock-in protocol. It's simple, it's brutal. And it works if you follow it with zero compromise. Most people underestimate time. They think identity change is immediate, or they think it requires years of trial and error. Neither is true. Consistency compounds faster than effort. Behavior repeated daily rewires your self-image irreversibly. Your nervous system stops asking permission. It begins operating under new rules automatically. Here's the structure: 6 months divided into daily architecture. Every day counts, every behavior votes, every repetition locks in identity. Step 1, daily non-negotiables. This is your backbone. 3 to 5 critical behaviors that define the person you want to become. They are not optional, no excuses, no debate. Examples: wake up at the same time every morning, complete a focused work block, exercise for at least 20-40 minutes, read or study for growth daily, journal or review standards. You enforce these behaviors relentlessly. Do not negotiate, do not delay. Your old identity cannot survive this consistency. Step 2, language alignment. Speak and think like the person you are becoming. No trying, no someday, no maybe. Say, I execute. Say, I complete. Say, I follow my standard. Your words program your nervous system faster than motivation ever will. Language plus repetition locks identity. Step 3, environment optimization. Your space, your routines, your people, your inputs, all of them must reinforce the new identity. Remove triggers that vote for the old self. Add cues that vote for the new self. Your environment is your silent coach. It votes every minute. Use it to your advantage. Step 4, tracking and feedback. You cannot leave this to memory. Track daily execution. Review weekly. Correct deviations immediately. Tracking is proof. Proof reinforces identity. Proof tells your nervous system, we follow through. Step 5, non-negotiable standards escalation. Your new identity cannot plateau. Raise standards gradually but consistently. When a behavior becomes easy, raise the bar. When consistency is mastered, add a new non-negotiable. Your identity evolves because the old self cannot survive the pressure. This is the essence of forced adaptation. Let's talk about resistance. Resistance is inevitable. The old self will push back. Your nervous system will resist. Your emotions will scream. Do not listen to them. Action precedes belief. Repetition beats feeling. Consistency crushes excuses. Step 6, integration of all elements: behavior, language, environment, standards, tracking. Combine them daily. No compromises, no breaks. The protocol is holistic. You cannot succeed if one element is missing. Step 7. Weekly reinforcement. Once per week, review standards, track results, and adjust non-negotiables. Celebrate consistency, not outcomes. Reward identity, not results. The nervous system responds to repeated evidence of follow-through, not external success. Step 8. 6-month endpoint. After 6 months, something remarkable happens. The old self loses relevance. Your habits operate automatically. Your behavior aligns with your identity effortlessly. This is the lock-in. It is permanent, or at least extremely resilient. Here's the key insight. It is not intensity that changes you. It is relentless daily execution under clear standards. What you repeat for 6 months becomes who you are. Here's how people sabotage themselves. They wait for motivation. They negotiate with the old self. They skip days. They tolerate low standards. All of these are identity reversals. Every lapse strengthens the old self. Every negotiation votes for mediocrity. So the 6-month protocol is not optional. It is a hard reset, a full replacement. Let's break down a practical daily schedule for 6 months. Morning, wake up at the same time. Immediate physical movement. Brief review of standards or journaling. Daytime, execute top priority work block. Consume aligned inputs, learning, growth, mentorship. Track completion. Evening. Reflection and journaling. Plan next day. Review adherence to non-negotiables. Throughout the day, language alignment. Internal and external speech is precise. Environmental alignment. Maintain spaces, cues, and associations. Zero negotiation with standards. Follow this daily without exception, and the nervous system rewires. Now let's talk about psychology. Humans crave instant results. 6 months feels long in the beginning, but identity does not depend on instant gratification. It depends on compounding consistency. The magic of 6 months is that repetition becomes automatic before emotion catches up. Before you realize it, who you are has shifted irreversibly. And here is the final mantra for this chapter. What you repeat for 6 months becomes who you are. Repeat your non-negotiables. Repeat aligned language. Repeat identity-supporting environments. Repeat standards without negotiation. Track, adjust, and enforce. Every day counts. Every vote matters. Every repetition compounds. 6 months is all it takes. After that, your life is no longer optional. Your standards, your habits, your identity, they are permanent. Your old self will try to return. Do not listen. You've replaced it. The nervous system now knows the rules. The body, the mind, the emotions, they all follow. This is the 6-month identity lock-in protocol. It is the final step in the reset. All the chapters, action, repetition, language, environment, standards come together here. You've acted. You've spoken clearly. You've raised standards. You've aligned your environment. You've repeated relentlessly. Now lock it in. 6 months of unwavering discipline. 6 months of non-negotiables. 6 months of proof. What you repeat for 6 months becomes who you are. And after 6 months, you will wake up and realize the old identity is gone. You are no longer negotiating. You are no longer trying. You are the person you built. This is the endpoint of the reset, the permanent transformation, the irreversibly new you. And if you want the final acceleration, if you want to ensure nothing can undo it, you will take these principles and embed them into every corner of your life. Because transformation is not a moment, it is a system. And now you have the complete system. You have reached the reset. The 6-month identity lock-in is the culmination. Everything else, standards, behavior, repetition, language, environment, was preparation. Now you live it. Now you execute. Now it becomes who you are. What you repeat for 6 months becomes who you are. No exceptions, no negotiations, no compromises. Your new self is permanent. Your reset is complete. This is the final chapter. the reset begins and ends with you. You are not stuck, you are loyal to an identity that no longer deserves you. For the next 6 months, you will wake up as the same person only if you choose comfort over standards, emotion over action, and excuses over ownership. But if you apply what you've heard daily, relentlessly, without negotiation, you will not recognize the person you used to be. Discipline will feel natural, confidence will feel quiet, action will feel automatic. This is your challenge. Decide today who you are becoming, then behave as if there is no return path. 6 months from now, your life will either confirm your old identity or prove that you replaced it. Choose wisely, then act.